On the evening of May 1st, 1786, at the Burgtheater in Vienna, the Marriage of Figaro, a now iconic operatic work, was played for the first time in front of a live audience. Before the curtain was lifted, the audience heard the same frenetic overture that prepared them for the story ahead, one featuring a comedic depiction of a servant couple preparing for their wedding day, alongside a hidden commentary based on Mozart's view of class struggle. Mozart's awareness of class struggle was surely present and most likely began in his early 20s, working under the Prince Archbishop of Salzburg. Mozart's early musical success, shown through his title of keyboard virtuoso and the commission of I Dominio in Munich, was indicative that the young prodigy had a promising career ahead of him. However, upon visiting Vienna in March 1781, he was dumbfounded when he heard that leading performers at the Countess Thun's residence were being paid 50 ducats for the performance. That was half his annual salary in Salzburg. Despite warnings from the Archbishop's steward, Mozart left the Archbishop's service to make it as a freelance musician in Vienna. For the next few years, Mozart participated in numerous public and private performances as an independent musician in Vienna, creating a substantial income. Mozart's popularity as a keyboard virtuoso peaked in 1785 and then declined in 1786 as the public lost interest in his skills as a performer. Fortunately, Mozart was entering the field of Italian opera at the time, which allowed his popularity to be sustained elsewhere. With his transition to Italian opera came the need to commission performances in a new theater. The official Viennese theater at the time was called the Burgtheater, which opened on March 14, 1741, on the site of a former tennis court in the garden of the Hofburg under the administration of the court. In 1776, the Emperor Joseph II decreed that the Burgtheater was to be established as the national theater. The relatively small building was designed in a flamboyant neo-Baroque style, although many fundamental constructional mistakes were made. The ascending boxes and relatively small floor space proved to be very inconvenient for both visuals and acoustics and were soon taken out about a century later. During Mozart's early years in Vienna, the Burgtheater's repertory switched from mainly German operas to Italian operas. As a result of this change, Mozart prepared an Italian opera buffa in hopes that it would be performed. This was done without any commission, but Mozart was sure that this type of opera would be successful in Vienna. Mozart's opera buffas were not written because they were of his personal taste, but because he was aware of the Viennese public's preference for that type of opera at the time. The Burgtheater singers, on average, were relatively young at the time of the premiere. For example, Anna Gottlieb was only 12 years old when she played the role of Barbarina in The Marriage of Figaro's premiere. Andrew Steptoe states in his book The Mozart Depant Operas that it is often apparent that young singers have an artistry and technique developed well in advance of physical capacity and resonance, making their voices appropriate for smaller theaters. It is also worth noting that Mozart would have hired younger, lesser-known singers so that he would be able to expose them to the public. With his confidence that the topic of Figaro was enough to garner attention and popularity from the general public, Mozart knew that he could sacrifice the appeal of well-known singers in order to encourage an expansion of singers in the Italian repertory over the coming years. Nancy Storace, daughter of an Italian bass player and English mother, had some fame as a teenage prodigy soprano and joined the Burgtheater at age 18. The young performer was the first to play the role of Susanna at The Marriage of Figaro's premiere. She had a roughness to her voice that reinforced the humorous tone of opera buffa numbers, but lacked a natural sweetness. Vivacity and commitment to the role is something Mozart favored over vocal perfection in his opera buffas, since those traits sharply contrasted the conventional role of vocals in opera seria.
Something else not conventional in opera seria, but highlighted in opera buffa, is the tendency to expose issues seen in society at the time over a veil of comedy. Figaro includes the message of class struggle. Despite the steps towards social refinement undertaken by Emperor Joseph II, the discussion of a largely necessary social reform was not something that could yet be openly professed. The upper class is rarely willing to give away its power, so the Viennese had to resort to alternate methods of expressing contempt regarding social structure. In the words of a contemporary, In our times, we sing what we are not allowed to say. Figaro is a prime example of a presentation of a work of art where its viewers can both be entertained and understand the subliminal message that the upper class of Vienna is too powerful. The entire plot being based around a count trying to get his way with the wife of one of his servants is in itself something that shows how the upper class perceives and treats the lower classes. However, contrary to the count's wishes, the lower class is able to resist and fight back. In addition, the countess pities and helps Cherubino hide from the count in Act 2, and helps compose a letter with Susanna in the third act. Even in the score, one can see undertones of the call to social reform. Through some arias and numbers, Susanna is singing at higher pitches compared to the countess, where usually higher pitches are reserved for people of higher social status. The trio in Act 2 is most evident of this reversal of roles. All of these elements seen in the opera contribute to the overall message that the upper and lower classes should be more on the same level, and that they are able to cooperate and settle on their differences at the end of the day, even in the real world. Overall, Mozart's Figaro is inconspicuously a call to unity between the social classes of Vienna. Although Mozart and Dupont worked on portraying the goals of the lower class to be more cooperative, the play their Figaro was based on did not have the same ideas in mind. The play that was adapted into Figaro was Beaumarchais' The Barber of Seville, which included a much more licentiously written plotline, in which the ultimate goal was to overthrow the upper class and put them in their place. To avoid the pathos of an uprising, Dupont had to navigate around this message and lighten the mood, both through making this an opera buffa, as well as changing the motive of most of the cast entirely. In Dupont's own words to Joseph II, "I have omitted or cut anything that might offend good taste or public decency at a performance over which the sovereign majesty might preside." The Beaumarchais play included inflammatory language that had to be cut out, including Figaro's speech in Act 5, Scene 3, which denounces hereditary power and censorship. The original play had Count Almaviva being suppressed by his wife and completely unable to do what he wanted as a person in power. This had to be changed by making the Count have a more dominant role over his wife, while having Figaro and Susanna be more crafty and able to keep the Count in his pursuit at bay. In addition, by adapting the play into a light comedy and having the end of the opera possess a more positive tone, where everyone is seen celebrating the day, Dupont was able to circumvent what would have been a huge roadblock in its production. These changes were deemed adequate by Joseph II, who definitely did not want his throne to be overturned by the production of an opera, and thus the show was able to go on. Joseph II was noticeably in favor of Dupont and Mozart producing an opera such as Figaro. Dupont recounts a point of contention in the premiere that was exposed on the day of the dress rehearsal. Someone had revealed to the emperor that Figaro was supposed to have a ballet in it. This was an issue because dancing was recently banned in the theater. Although this was true, Joseph II had no issue allowing the dancers in Figaro after he saw the dance in action. This was indicative of the social reform that even the emperor found necessary at the time, and his willingness to allow art forms to express this need for societal improvement. In addition to Joseph II greatly supporting the movement of Figaro's social commentary, the public also seemed to agree with it. In fact, the public was so receptive to Mozart's work that Joseph II had to ban excessive encores for the opera to go on in a timely manner. In the premiere, some arias and numbers had to be repeated once or twice per the audience's request. On the other hand, the nobility showed little interest in the plotline. Count Karl von Zinzendorf, an influential government official, bluntly stated, "The opera bored me," mentioning that Mozart's music shows great dexterity but has no ideas. In addition, Dupont analyzed general reactions in one of his memoirs. Mozart's opera was shown on the stage, and in spite of the doubts, reserves, and headshaking of the other maestros and their partisans, in spite of the Count, in spite of Casti and of 100 devils, It was a success with the public, while the sovereign and other real connoisseurs judged it a thing sublime, not to say divine. Dupont's observation eloquently condenses the effect of Figaro's premiere, showing in general the Viennese reaction. While both Joseph II and the public endorsed its message, the upper class spectating the opera had their oppositions due to the commentary it provided, as giving up wealth and power is not exactly desired by the gentry and nobility. By the public gaining somewhat of a political voice in the production and presentation of this opera, Joseph II was aided by Mozart and Dupont so that his efforts toward a socially just nation would be more tangible and attainable. One can further recognize Emperor Joseph's need for Figaro's popularity through his desire to continually show the opera, even privately. After the premiere, Joseph II hosted a special performance in his summer residence, where the cast performed exclusively for the nobility that the emperor handpicked. Thus, it can be deduced that Joseph II saw Figaro as a means of expressing his opinion on the social condition.
The art of disguising class struggle and other social problems behind a veil of comedy inside an opera was something replicated for almost a century after Mozart produced this opera buffa, until 1848 when censorship was abolished. 40 years later, the Burg Theater was demolished in order to be replaced with a bigger, better opera house. All in all, Mozart and Dupont worked together to create a masterpiece that perfectly explicated the Viennese issues of class struggle and disparity that the upper classes created. The duo stitched together all aspects of the opera, the music, actors, and most importantly, the libretto to help convey their message. By crafting Figaro to allow for its message to pass through the censorship and attracting the strong support of Joseph II, the opera was bound to make a lasting impact on Viennese culture that roused the public for years to come.